Game Design 2, Module 1, Lecture Overview. Welcome to Game Design 2. This first lecture series covers the following topics: introduction to your course director and a bit about their background, an overview of the course assignments, schedule, structure, and grade weightings, detailed explanation of this month's project assignment. We'll cover the core concepts for this month, and then we'll get into a quick review of flow, which you should remember from previous classes. Finally, we'll wrap it up with some discussion on meaningful decisions and some pitfalls to avoid. I'm also trying something new with this version of the course. I'm chopping up the long lectures into smaller, more topic-focused videos. This way, instead of one 90-minute lecture, you'll have a few 10 to 20-minute videos that, I hope, will make it easier to watch and review. Some of these videos are optional, and I will be sure to identify the critical learning objectives apart from my examples and personal stories. However, I encourage you to watch everything twice if you need to, listen to the examples, follow links to additional information, and even do your own independent research and cross-referencing. I'm also implementing a new way to link topics contextually using a tool called the Brain, which is a lot like a visual thesaurus. You should be able to see these visualized in FSO. I hope to make it a bit like a branching story or choose your own adventure experience. You are in control of your educational journey. Will you simply apply the minimum required effort to pass? Or will you fully apply yourself to get the maximum benefit? The choice is yours. So are the results. Own them both. Game Design 2, Module 1, Lecture Part 1. Hello, I'm John Fairchild, the course director for Game Design 2. Please note, your section may have a different instructor. Please refer to FSO. Click on the instructor icon and view your instructor's details and preferred contact methods. You may also have a welcome announcement from your instructor with his or her contact info and other important information. There is also an instant messaging service available, the details of which can be found in FSO as announcements or other activities. I graduated in 2002 from Full Sail Real-World Education, before it was an accredited university. I've since completed my bachelor's in game design and development. From 2003 to 2004, I stuck around and worked as a lab specialist in Final Project and Rules of the Game. Through networking, I became part owner in a startup using Unreal Engine, version 2 at that time, for distributed research, training, and simulation. We fielded a couple of projects at West Point, and other successes led to the sale of the company. After the startup was bought, I went to work for America's Army, a game funded by the U.S. Army that sought to portray the real soldier experience. Not like Battlefield, where I can jump from one jet to another. Not like Call of Duty, where I'm rewarded for headshots, kill streaks, and knifing the enemy. But rather an experience that focused on teamwork, communication, and always putting the mission first. I worked on AA2 and AA3 before leading initial design efforts on version 4 dubbed Proving Grounds, which, by the way, you can still download for free on Steam and PlayStation at the time of the recording of this lecture. I was part of several other public-facing projects with AGS, like VAE, Go Army Edge Football, Colt Snap, the STEM Van Experience, Wonderworks and other museums, and the infamous Moonbase Alpha. More on that in Lecture 2. Additionally, I have 60-plus serious games under my belt that the public will never know about because they are either FOUO, that's for official use only, or outright classified information. One exception is the Tricked, that is, the Tactical Reconfigurable Integrated Crew Trainer. The AGS customer released a public video about this project, so I'm now allowed to share that freely with you. The link is in FSO under Option Material 1.1.1-A. So, the bottom line is my background is heavily focused on serious games. I love games for good and educational games, which is why I came back to Full Sail, because I love to teach. My long-term career goal? I want to revolutionize education with interactive software, also known as games. I actually hate the term gamification, but it's the one we know, so I'll use it. It is applying game mechanics, tools, technology, and other techniques to make real-life activities more enjoyable and/or engaging. This is a huge field that is growing rapidly. If you think the entertainment games generate a lot of revenue, consider DoD, that's Department of Defense, plus education, plus healthcare. Your degree will qualify you to design serious games as well as entertainment titles. And don't think that it's a lifelong decision that you'll have to make at graduation. You're not stuck there if you decide to give it a try. It can be a stepping stone on a path many others have taken to the heights of commercial entertainment games. You may have to sacrifice some cool points, but the trade-off is higher pay, more job stability, typically less stress, and no mandatory or unpaid crunch time. Game Design 2, Module 1, Lecture, Part 2. This is the course overview for Game Design 2. Before we begin, I'd like to call your attention to the numbering standards used throughout the course. This is Module 1. Modules are specific topics or learning objectives for the course. There are 8 total. Typically, 2 are assigned per week. Next is the activity type. This is a lecture, denoted by the number 1. ILAs and reading assignments are 2, labs 3, leaving quizzes to be denoted by the number 4. Each type will be discussed in this overview. Finally, lectures are broken out into segments or parts for your convenience. This is Part 2 of the first lecture for the first module. The numbering methodology is intended to help you while learning and referencing the material. In this introductory lecture segment, we will cover the course roadmap, lectures, labs, quizzes, reading assignments, and ILAs. ILAs are for on-campus students only. We'll also go into depth on the original game and analysis project, as well as some other general housekeeping. Typically, we try to open up everything in FSO as much as possible, as early as possible, so you can prepare for the road ahead. So, let's dive right in. Course roadmap. Here is the whole course at a glance. Don't be scared. You can pause the video if needed to really take it all in. We've tried to keep things routine. For the first 3 weeks, there are 2 lectures per week, 1 lab and 1 quiz pertaining to each lecture, 1 reading assignment, and 1 ILA for on-campus students. Note, campus should be doing 2 ILAs per week. The second is a UX test. All of the UX tests are due in week 4, giving you plenty of time and flexibility to complete them. There is also 1 milestone for your original game and analysis project each week. In the final week, there is 1 lecture, but no labs or quizzes, thus giving you plenty of time to focus on finishing your project. Another quick aside about the outline numbering. If you're online, there are no .2 FSO assignments. These are the ILAs for on-campus students. Online reading assignments are part of the .1 activity, which is primarily watching the video lecture, like this one. On campus may not have the .1 FSO assignment, as lectures are typically given live, in person, by the course director. However, campus students may be given links to online lectures for review, which would be a .1 activity, or maybe an announcement. The future plan is to occasionally also post interesting discussions, examples, debates, or sidebars that were captured on campus, the point being to help and benefit the online students from these live in-person, on-campus discussions. So you are currently watching the introduction segment of Lecture 1. The review segments will readdress topics from Game Design 1, specifically flow and meaningful decisions. Along the way, we will also cover the foundational concepts which are the focus of Lecture Number 2, MDA-M. That is primarily Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics. This is core to the learning objectives for this course and what this month is all about. Why we select certain mechanics and how we implement those mechanics to create a target player experience or aesthetic. All the following lectures build on this core foundation, following design decisions from implementation through final results. And the original game and analysis project is a practical application thereof. More on that project in the next segment. Targeting players covers both demographics and psychographics. Read Bartle's taxonomy and dig up your old scores from when you took the Ocean personality assessment. Puzzles cover common puzzle mechanics, some common practices as well as pitfalls, and how we can target the widest demographic by adjusting difficulty using 2 flavors of breadcrumbs or hints. Feedback loops, or player feedback, might sound like something you'd get from a playtest, but this is in fact focused on how your systems and mechanics will give feedback to the player to encourage certain behaviors while punishing others. Reward schedules, also known as the behaviorism lecture, is my personal favorite, and the first of 2 psychology-focused lessons. We'll talk about how operant conditioning and other predictable psychological effects can be leveraged to keep players playing and sometimes even keep them paying. Human decision-making is the behavioral economics lecture. There is no quiz for this topic, so you could call it a bonus. But it's a chunk full of useful, interesting, befuddling, and downright weird phenomenon most of all neurotypical human brains suffer from and or fall victim to. Will you wield this newfound power for good or for evil? Is it currently making you the victim of another game designer's evil plans? You better believe it is. The last lecture slot is for a sort of showcase day, where on-campus students show off their hard work to their peers in class. There is no video lecture for this module. However, online students are encouraged to make a gameplay video and share it with peers if desired. But this is an unweighted and totally optional activity. Your game will speak for itself when graded after the final milestone. Hopefully, through proper play testing, you found and fixed any issues a new player would encounter. Labs and quizzes. Each of the first 6 lectures, including this one, has both a lab and quiz activity associated with it. There are also reading assignments that will expound upon lecture concepts and will be critical to your success on the labs and quizzes. I recommend this order of completion. Read the quiz. Make notes. Do the reading. Take notes. Watch the lecture. Take notes. Do the lab. Yep, more notes. Then complete the quiz. While doing so, review the readings, lectures, labs, and of course, your notes. The labs are not weighted. Rather, I ensure that you have completed and mastered the concepts via targeted questions on the knowledge checks, aka the quizzes. There will be questions on the quiz that you will probably not know or understand unless you have successfully completed the lab. There's a method to this approach. The initial concepts are introduced by the reading and further explained and developed by the lectures. The labs are activities to practice applications of this newfound knowledge. The quiz is a knowledge check to ensure that you have retained, understood, and mastered the learning objectives. Yep, introduce, practice, and master. Discussed elsewhere is the application of mastered skills in the original game and analysis project, My goal is not simply to have you do my class, but rather understand, master, and apply the learning objectives. To this end, the quizzes are open book, open note, open internet, and open everything, except your peers or other individuals. You must do it on your own, but other than that, use any and all resources at your disposal. Memorization is not the purpose. I don't expect any student to sit down and answer each question from memory. Instead, the quizzes are structured so students need to derive an answer. You have to use what you've learned to figure it out. Are some questions right out of the reading or lecture? Sure. In some cases, I'm checking for retention. However, more often I'm looking for comprehension. I might ask a question about a boss encounter in a game you've never played. I expect you to do a web search, read an article, and/or watch a video to understand the mechanics at play, and then combine that with your newfound knowledge to derive an answer. So, a side note, this is exactly what you'll have to do at your first job. If your lead says, I want you to make this encounter like the Jabberwocky fight, are you going to say, sorry, I never played that game? Or are you going to say, sure thing, I can do that, as you quickly go and look it up online? Finally, just again, a reminder, there are no labs or quizzes in the final week. This is so you can focus on completing your project, so use that time wisely. ILAs. ILAs are integrated learning assignments. These activities are for on-campus students only and typically involve alternative forms of learning other than lectures. Reading assignments are one example. Others include watching online videos, TED Talks, industry lectures, training courses, etc. Players Making Decisions is the text on which all reading assignments will be based. See FSO for details on accessing the text through Safari Books. Beyond the reading assignments, on-campus students are required to participate in 4 UX tests, typically held in the UX lab in Building 2. This is a fantastic resource and opportunity to participate in hands-on interactive learning that directly apply to this course's learning objectives. In your project, you are playtesting your original game, collecting data, and analyzing it to inform future iterations. In the UX lab, you are a playtester on the other side of the one-way glass. You're the proverbial rat in the maze, wondering if the cheese is a lie. The obvious parallels are, well, obvious, so I won't belabor how awesome this opportunity is to further solidify core concepts. I will, however, also point out that this experience is worth every minute you can spare, and I encourage both on-campus and online students to participate in as many UX, beta, alpha, focus groups, and other playtests as possible. Yes, it's great experience, but I'll also tell you it's a great conversation in a job interview. How would you like to tell a recruiter at a prospective job interview, I've completed so many UX and beta tests for your game studio, I practically work for you already? Or when asked, have you ever participated in one of our open betas, would you rather reply, no, I was too busy playing Fortnite? Bottom line, do the UX test. Enjoy them. Learn from them. Soak up the experience. The specifics for how you'll record credit for and participation of and completion are listed in the welcome announcements and ILA activities in FSO for the on-campus students. Game Design 2, Module 1, Lecture, Part 3. This segment covers the original game and analysis project. All of this is also explicitly and painstakingly detailed out in the FSO activities. The original game and analysis project constitutes 45% of this course's academic weight. Week 1 milestone is a succinct GD2 that covers overview, theme adherence, gratis, and includes diagrams. Milestones 2 and 3 are identical: a build that runs and shows progress, and a playtest report with at least 4 new playtesters per student. Note, only 20% of milestones 2 and 3 are for the game, leaving 80% weight on the "and analysis." Focus your efforts appropriately. The final milestone has the same deliverables as 2 and 3, but more weight is on the actual game functionality, novelty, and clarity, specifically in regards to how it provides feedback to the player, i.e., your instructor, the one grading the assignment. Check FSO and the rubric for full details on how this final build is graded. The theme, the mentality. Your original game must adhere to a given theme. Here's why. When you land your first job, you will not be asked to write a whole design document for a brand new game concept of your choosing. More likely, you will be given a task to tweak some small part of one of many systems in the game. For instance, your lead might say, "The shotgun isn't getting used enough in close quarters combat. Players are using the sniper rifle at distance and the assault rifle at mid-range as expected, but when they're indoors, they're still using the assault rifle instead of the shotgun. See what you can do to fix that." This theme is intended to represent that type of guidance. You're being given a task, a goal, a target user experience, outcome, behavior, dynamic, etc. Your theme is dictated by the month of your cohort term, i.e. the last 2 digits in your section number. Example, January of 2019, cohort 201901, would have the theme "Everything Falls Apart," 01. December would be 12, the final 2 digits. Those would adhere to the theme "Inequality." Important. The implementation of the theme must be mechanical, not story-based thematics. For example, platforming, where each platform falls apart as the player is trying to traverse them, is a technical implementation, a mechanical implementation. Saying, "You're the last human on Earth after the world's governments have fallen apart," and then implementing a normal platformer is not mechanical, but rather the theme is just fluff in the backstory. The theme must apply to the player's minute-to-minute experience, gameplay, and decision-making. So, how do we plan out this approach? The GD2. You start with a synced game design document. In our example of being tasked with tweaking the shotgun so players are more apt to use it for close quarters combat, even after being given the task, your lead is not going to just let you go and trust that in 4 weeks you'll have figured out a way to meet that next milestone. No. What are they going to want? They're going to want a plan. They will want to know what your ideas are and why you think they'll work to produce the intended player experience. The GD2 is not meant to be a huge, all-encompassing document. Focus on the theme and how you'll meet it. FSO covers all of this, but I'll reiterate the 4 primary requirements of your GD2 for this assignment. 1. An introductory paragraph, giving an overview of your idea. 2. A theme paragraph. How does your idea meet the theme? Don't just state the theme. Tell me how your idea knocks it out of the park. 3. Gratis. Remember from GD1? Goals, rules, actions, transitions, items, and setup. Don't skimp on this section. It should be apparent how and that your idea will work based on the details in this section. Side note, your lead doesn't want to read an essay or wade through paragraphs of prose to get at the meat of your idea. Use bullet points and succinct verbiage. No fluff. Stick to the point and the core theme. I don't need to know that WASD is how you move. I know that already. Tell me about the interesting and original parts and how they work. Finally, number 4, diagrams. The best way to save on words and make this clear, succinct, and understandable is to use a picture. The assignment calls for at least 3, but please use as many as necessary and don't just lump them into a diagram section. Use them as support throughout the GDD and in the gratis section details. Another important note, the screenshots here are of the template I provide as an attachment in the assignment. It is only a template meant to be a starting point to get you going. It is not an all-encompassing fill-in-the-blank worksheet. We're long past that grade school approach. You will need to add, modify, correct, and improve this document to make it your own and reflective of your effort and skill level. There are pieces missing, and some sections are simply stubbed in. Please take the time to make this a professional document. The way it is intended to work is by representing a living, growing, and evolving document like you may see in your professional career. It all starts with the plan, that is, the GDD in Section 1. Each milestone, you will fill out another section and turn in the full document. In reality, you'd be updating the design to reflect the action plans made after testing for each iteration. That is not required for this assignment. We will not be checking to see if the design is updated to reflect the most current plan. However, you do need to update the file name and the header info. That's the text block at the beginning of the document with your name and assignment info in it. This needs to reflect the current milestone and status of the document. For example, points would be deducted if you turn in a document titled GDD for any milestone other than the first. Again, all of this is spelled out in the FSO activities. So let's move on. The playtest reports. Milestones 2 and 3 and the playtest reports. This section consists of the data collected from each of your playtesters during their test section. And more on this in Lab 2.3, playtesting with forms. You typically wouldn't ever want to turn in raw data as your report. If your boss has to parse through the data themselves, why pay you? You may include the raw data as an appendix or a backup section, but here we'll just want a nicely groomed summary. This is also not the place for charts or graphs, as this will be a single playtester's data. Charts and graphs typically visualize aggregated data, or combined data. You're required to have 4 new playtesters per team member, per milestone. Milestones 2, 3, and 4, that is. So, a solo act needs 4, and a duo needs 8, and so on. You need fresh eyes. So if you want to have the same person test a subsequent milestone, go for it. A lot can be learned from comparing the data of a single tester from an old build to a current. But they do not meet the new stipulation of the 4 new playtesters requirement. So let them retest, but get at least 4 new pairs of eyes per milestone. In the document, you should have 1 and only 1 playtester results per page in that section. That is, separate each playtest section with a page break. It would also be super cool and professional to make that the start of each section heading and uniformly formatted to work with a table of contents that I've already provided in the template. You must include all of the data stipulated in the FSO assignment. Heads up, there is not a bullet for each required data point in the template. This is the part where you need to add and make it your own. Like I said, the template is a starting point, not an exhaustive fill-in-the-blank worksheet. So make sure to update it with what is required, including all the prompts in Lab 2.3, and also your own unique data points specific to your game and what you're trying to figure out about your playtesters' experiences. Analysis. This next section is by far the most important in the whole report. It's easy to collect and list data, but paramount is your ability to derive an empirical conclusion, and then also a reasonable action plan to guide the next iteration and improve the overall player experience. Anyone can say, I have cool ideas, but a professional game designer knows how to prove they are cool with scientific study and logical reasoning. Again, back to the example of a tweak to the shotgun mechanics. You made your plan, the boss approved it. The next step is not to implement it in the release build. Rather, the boss will want you to prototype it, hence the playtesting. Then what? Do you say, well, the devs played it, and all the testers liked it, so ship it? No. You have to go beyond anecdotal evidence, that which is unreliable conclusions based on personal accounts rather than facts or research. When asked, what's your opinion on the changes to the shotgun? You should be able to say, I'm a professional. I don't have opinions. I have data. Blam. That's the sound of you dropping the mic and walking upstairs to your new corner office. So the analysis takes all the data collected and forms logical, provable, data-supported findings and conclusions. For example, you could say 25% of subjects couldn't beat the boss, and the same 25% said the game was too difficult. The boss difficulty is having a negative effect on the player experience. Or another example. After we added a big glowing green arrow over the secret tunnel, 90% of players found the secret weapon that one-shots the boss, and they didn't complain about the difficulty anymore. Our subtle hint is working to improve the player experience. Warning: do not simply restate the data. You need to either cross-reference multiple points or aggregate multiple subjects' results to form a conclusion beyond what the data clearly and obviously shows. Don't just say 80% of pie charts look like Pac-Man. Duh, I can see that. You need to dig deeper. For example, Sherlock Holmes, he doesn't stop at pointing out all of the clues, all of the data he found. He identifies the killer and goes even further to explain exactly how they did it. Another important note: you must have diagrams and/or graphs in the analysis section. It's a professional standard and will help the reader visualize your data and conclusions. Also, as you'll find out in Lab 2.3, Google does all the hard work for you. Do the lab and use the tools provided to make your job easier. Action plan. This leaves only the action plan section, which is the most straightforward section in the whole report. It's a bulleted list of steps you plan to take because of your findings. That's it. They must be reasonable, feasible, and most importantly, derived from the conclusions in your analysis. You are not graded on if you actually act or accomplish these plans. That comes later in Capstone and other project classes. Here, we simply want to see that you can use the results of all your playtesting and analyzing efforts to some productive end. And even in the biggest studios, not even half of the original plans come to fruition. So, that was a lot. Let's recap. Game Design 2, Course Roadmap at a Glance. Everything covered in the course overview is also in FSO. Please read everything thoroughly. Important information about your course director can also be found in FSO by clicking their profile picture. There are 7 lectures, including this one, which is largely introduction and review. There are 6 quizzes constituting 45% of the weighting in this course. There are also 6 labs, which are not weighted, but they are important for success on the quizzes. Do them first before attempting the quiz. The original game and analysis project also accounts for 45% of this course's overall weight. Week 1 milestone is a succinct GDD that covers the overview, theme adherence, gratis, and includes at least 3 diagrams. Milestones 2 and 3 are identical: a build that runs, showing progress, and a playtest report with data from at least 4 new playtesters per student. Remember, only 20% of milestones 2 and 3 are for the game, leaving 80% weight on the "and" analysis. The final milestone has the same turn-in requirements as 2 and 3, but more weight is on the actual game. Specifically, its novelty, clarity, and feedback to the player. That's me, your instructor. The final 10% is for professionalism, completing assignments on time, properly submitting and interacting with the FSO platform, and as always, respectful communications with faculty and peers. The player's making decision is the textbook for this month. Do the reading before attempting the quizzes. I also suggest completing and reading before watching or attending lectures. It's like listening to the quest giver's hints about the boss before going into the fight. Can you skip it and still be successful? Sure, but not as successful as somebody who took the time to learn first. Finally, time is your enemy. Get started now. Just because the first build isn't due until the end of week 2 doesn't mean you can't actually get started now. The quickest path to a testable prototype is a common practice when starting new interactive projects. Get to something you can test. Don't worry about how it looks. Collect data and let that be your guide for future decisions and iterations. Finally, late work and extensions are at the discretion of your instructor. However, quizzes cannot be extended or completed after the posted deadline, so please plan and act accordingly. Game Design 2, Module 1, Lecture Part 4. Core Concepts. Here, we'll introduce and discuss the core learning objectives we'll be building upon this month. Some of this is brought forward from previous classes, but here we'll set the stage to dive deeper into understanding and applying this knowledge. This month we'll be talking about the discipline of game design, meaning what game designers do and ways to be successful at it. We will also be talking about techniques and tools which game designers use to create products. You've learned about many tools in past classes, from documents to game engines. In this class, tools also refers to the mechanics or features that you select for your game and how you go about implementing them. For example, do you want the player to be able to jump? Is it a realistic 3-foot high jump or 3 times as high as the player? Can you steer in the air? Can you double jump? Can you wall jump? All of these are mechanical decisions that will affect the overall player experience. Which brings us to what we will focus on the most: the hands-on practice and application of the two. This practice will take 2 forms. 1, you will explore new perspectives on mechanics and interactions. And 2, you will be creating your own game by designing, prototyping, playtesting, collecting data, analyzing said data, and iterating on your initial prototype design based on your analysis. In short, you will participate in a micro, spiral, or agile design process with 1-week sprints. But before we dig into all that, I have a personal question to ask you. Why make games? It's a personal question because there's no right or wrong answer. Take a minute and think about what makes game development so special to you. Why have you subjected yourself to this challenging, fast-paced, and crazy, awesome undertaking that is Full Sail University? You know that your reward is long hours, under constant pressure to ship a game on time, and it's full of course changes, unforeseen hurdles, sleepless nights, sweat, and tears. So why do it? While you're thinking of your answer, let me take a step back and ask a preliminary question because I feel it's important to make sure we're all using the same vernacular. What is a game? Is it challenge? Something fun to do? A puzzle? A competition? Escapism? A story? Art? Self-expression? Does it need points, rules, goals, protagonist and antagonist, levels, rewards? Is there anything else? I'd say that yes, a game can be all those things and can have all those elements, but not every game. I like to start by boiling it down to the smallest set of characteristics a thing must have to be considered a game. This is not a textbook definition, just something I've adopted, but for me, a game is an interactive experience that is guided by rules. Toys are interactive, but not necessarily guided by rules. Watch a young child call a block Mr. Blocky and have a conversation with it. All is possible in the imagination of a child. FSO quizzes are interactive and have rules, but they don't really provide you with a meaningful experience. Well, maybe the experience kind of experience, the XP kind of experience, but not life-changing variety. And art, like paintings, sculptures, and even movies, can evoke emotion and experience. That is, the audience can have a meaningful experience when viewing, but no matter what they do, the medium remains the same. It doesn't change based on the player's actions, so it is not interactive. I could fall asleep, and that movie is still going to play out the exact same way every time. Okay, so now come back to that original question. Why make games? Think about it for a minute. Here are some common answers I receive every time I ask this question. Because I like games. Games are fun. I played games when I was a kid, and I want to make games for other kids to play. I have creative ideas that can only be shared through a game. I like puzzles and problem solving, and making games is just one big puzzle. Even though it's very infrequent, sometimes I get to make a bunch of money and be famous. I'm not going to go into that last one, but I'll tell you, if you want to make a bunch of money and be famous, there are many other careers out there that might be better suited than video game design. However, I personally agree with each of the other answers, at least in part, and would bet that anyone taking this course would identify with at least one or two of those as well. Games are a medium, perhaps the newest medium to express the creative vision or convey an experience from one human to another. Plays, movies, sculptures, paintings, poems, songs, all of these mediums exist because somebody had something in their head that they felt compelled to share with others. You might be a digital poet, a logical artist, a virtual sculptor, an interactive author, and games are your medium. Unity or Unreal is your canvas, and the mechanics that we are going to discuss in this class are your brushes. Many diverse masterpieces can be created given these tools, but first, you must have a vision of the experience that you want to convey. So let's first talk about player experience in another medium we can understand. Movies. Movies follow a story arc that is neither smooth nor gradual. There are ups and downs, peaks and valleys, exciting moments, and backstory, ultimately leading to a climax and then falling off into some falling action. Here, we are looking what is known as a tension curve for Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. You'll notice tension starts high. This is known as the hook. Movies, as well as many video games, start with a high-action, high-tension moment to grab and engage the audience or player right from the get-go before dropping them down into a trough from whence they will climb to the climax throughout the journey. Assassin's Creed is famous for this, starting players with every weapon, every ability, feeling unstoppable in an action-packed beat before finding some excuse to take it all away and make them earn it back through 60-plus hours of gameplay. Here, we see the opening scene, where Princess Leia and the rebels flee Darth Vader with stolen Death Star plans as the high-action moment. Just think of everything that happens in the first 5 minutes. Spaceships, laser fire, boarding crews, droids, Darth Vader, mysterious messages, miraculous escapes. And then what? After that, we're subjected to something like 30 minutes of droids walking through the desert and Luke whining about power converters. It's not until he finds the charred remains of his aunt and uncle that we really have another engaging moment. The rest of the movie follows suit, with ups and downs between planets blowing up and Obi-Wan sneaking around on catwalks. And it all peaks with the trench run and the Death Star going boom. You're probably thinking about the difference between movies and games. As we discuss, movies are static. The script determines the character's actions. The writers craft these peaks and valleys to keep the audience engaged while not stressing them out with too much high action for too long. But in games, the player is making the decision. They can make mistakes. They can take longer than expected or totally skip certain parts. So really, rather than purely tension, game designers seek to craft mechanics that will create flow. Game Design 2, Module 1 Lecture, Part 5. This segment is a review on flow from learning objectives and discussion you may have gotten in previous classes. A solid understanding of flow is paramount to this course, so a review is warranted. I also encourage you to review past materials and do some personal research on your own. So, let's talk about this guy. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, a leading authority on flow who has written several books, one of which is called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. I could make a cool video telling you all about it, but somebody else beat me to it, so please follow the link and watch the video before returning and completing this segment. Also, take notes on the elements as they are discussed, especially the ones you think that pertain the most to game design. So here are the 4 aspects of the flow state that Mihai identifies and the reviewer highlights in his video. Is it just me, or does that sound like playing a really awesome video game? Intense focus and concentration on the present moment. Your chicken could be burning in the oven and you wouldn't know it. Your mom could be yelling to you to take out the trash, but you can't hear her. Your significant other could be asking, when are you going to stop playing that game? And you're just going to respond with, huh? Loss of reflective self-consciousness. You are no longer yourself sitting on your couch in front of your TV holding a controller. You are a race car driver on the final lap, or a wide receiver stretching out in the end zone. You are no longer moving your mouse or tapping the keyboard. You are wielding a sword decimating hordes of enemies, or lining up your target for a headshot. The activity is intrinsically rewarding. You're not feeling the seat, watching the clock, waiting for your shift to be over. You're not grinding out 5 million mobs to complete some quest prerequisite so that you can move on to the thing that you actually want. What you are doing right then, in the moment, it is the only thing that you want to be doing, and you're doing it because you enjoy it. Immediate feedback, the potential to succeed. I think we get it already. Good games create flow. So we hear the term flow thrown around a lot as a term and are told it's the prime directive of game design. But how can we visualize flow and possibly even chart it on a graph like the tension curve? Enter the flow diagram. The way this chart works is by measuring challenge on the vertical axis as compared to player's skill level on the horizontal. There are 4 major quadrants that we will talk about. If your game is presenting the player with a difficult or large amount of challenge, but the player has relatively low skill, what do you think that does to the player experience? Think about it. You've played a game that got way too hard, way too quickly before you had a chance to practice and get good at it. How did that make you feel? Frustrated, perhaps? High challenge, low skill equals frustration. Alternatively, when the player has high levels of skill and there's not an adequate amount of challenge, this would be like when you start a new first-person shooter, having played hundreds of hours of other first-person shooters, but they still start you off with, here's how to look, here's how to move, here's how to aim, here's how to interact. That same tutorial you've done 100 times, how do you feel then? You're probably bored. Low challenge combined with high skill results in boredom. And then there's the situation where the player is not skilled, but that's okay because the game isn't very challenging. This leads to apathy, a feeling like a good thing this game is easy because I don't know what I'm doing. Some people also equate this state to like time wasters or casual games. And on that note, I want to make sure to point out that none of these are quote-unquote bad or wrong. If you want to make a frustrating game, Dark Souls, go ahead and throw ridiculous amounts of challenge at the player. If you want the players to be able to play while also watching YouTube, talking on the telephone, and folding the laundry, then a low challenge game would fit that bill. The choice is up to you, but you should know where your decisions will lead. And this leaves the final quadrant, the flow channel, where the player experiences all the good stuff on the previous slide. The interesting part here is that you can't start in the flow channel. You must work your player through their experience up and into that state. Over time, typically by gradually increasing challenge as their skills mature. However, we'll talk much more on that in future lectures. This is just a quick review. Again, the main point to remember is that we will be looking at how the mechanics we pick and how we choose to implement those mechanics affect our player experience, including the ability to induce a state of flow, which is basically a balance between frustration and boredom, above some threshold of ever-increasing challenge. Game Design 2, Module 1 Lecture, Part 6. This segment is a review on player decisions that are made in-game and what makes them more or less meaningful. We will cover the parts of a decision and what happens when any of these parts are missing or misaligned. So, the three parts of any meaningful decision are knowing that a decision is being made, the decision point itself, the options that are available to the player, and the results that will occur based on each option. Another way of putting it is informed trade-offs with consequences. If the player does not have to risk or sacrifice anything, it's hardly a meaningful decision. If there's no benefit, regardless of what the player chooses, it's a no-win situation. Again, note that these aren't bad or wrong. They are merely the result of how one might implement decision mechanics. If you want the player to feel helpless and in a no-win situation, or conversely, like no matter what they choose, they can't lose, then go for it. However, typically this will result in diminished perception of meaningful choice. To use a cliche, it's 6 to 1 or half a dozen the other, and not really meaningful. Salen and Zimmerman list the parts as before, the backstory or state of the situation prior to the decision, communication, the decision point, what the player must decide, action, the options, consequences, the results, and feedback, how those results manifest to the player. So what happens if any of those parts are missing? Let's take a look. What if you didn't know where your options led? You know that you are at a decision point, and the options in front of you are clear. However, you have no idea where those options lead. We will call this a less than meaningful decision, and in this particular case, a blind decision. For example, let's imagine that you're in a labyrinth, three-dimensional maze, and you come up to a fork in the road. Do you go left or right? It's clear that you must make a decision. You're at a fork in the road. Your decisions are also painfully clear. You can only go one of two directions, left or right. So what do you choose? How do you choose? It's a coin toss. You have a 50-50 shot at the right answer, assuming there is a right answer. So let's play this out. You turn left, and around the next corner is a dead end. Did you choose correctly? Probably. Probably you're going to have to backtrack. Whose fault is it? Do you say to yourself, wow, I really blew that decision. I need to reevaluate how I go about making decisions in this game and in life in general. Or more likely, you'd probably say something like, stupid game, why did they even put this area here? I'm missing something. They could have at least put a treasure chest or Easter egg or something here. What was the game designer thinking? Yeah. When players make the wrong choice in a blind decision, they do not blame themselves. They blame you, the game designer. You can probably recall this happening in a game where you found yourself lost and confused as to what the game was really asking for, or how you were supposed to go about figuring out some challenge or puzzle presented. Remember, I'm not saying this is bad or wrong. If you want the player to feel lost and frustrated and helpless, blind decisions might be just the mechanic for you, but in any respect, you should be aware of the probable results of your design decisions. So the next clearly shows the decision point, the options, and the results, which happen to be an awesome thing, and then garbage, trash, and crap. What do you choose? Well, it's pretty obvious, which is exactly why we call this less than meaningful decision an obvious decision. Additionally, as discussed in the textbook, a choice between playing or not playing is also an obvious decision because we assume, since the player is currently playing, that they want to play. And then another type of obvious decision is giving the player a choice between something they can use based on previous decisions or cannot use because of other mechanics or systems at play. For example, a reward where the player can choose between new tires or an upgrade to 120mm rounds. The choice is obvious depending on if I'm driving a car or a tank, because tanks don't have tires and cars can't fire 120mm rounds. So putting it into the context of our labyrinth example, if I come to the fork in the road and I see where my options are going to lead, to the left, treasure and riches that I want, or to the right, certain death at the hands of a minotaur. It's not really a choice so much as a chore, or predetermined task. I know some of you are thinking, but I want to fight the minotaur, and to you I say, I get it, me too. But don't belabor the example. We're talking about how one option is clearly the correct answer, and nothing the player wants or desires can be gained by any other option. All right, so the next pitfall in crafting meaningful decisions comes when all the results lead to the exact same place. I know it's a decision point, my options and results, but no matter what I choose, the outcome is going to be the same. And this is true even if it takes a little while to realize I've been pushed along the course the designer wanted me to follow instead of the course that I chose or thought I was choosing. So I know my decision, left or right. I know that to the left is riches and treasures beyond my wildest dreams, and no sooner than I choose to pursue that direction, boom, cave in. Left route is blocked. Looks like you have to go right after all. Is this fooling anybody? Do you think that there is anything you could have done differently, any other decision you could have made that would have resulted in getting that treasure? Nope. And we've all played games like this. Walking Dead is notorious We're given a choice and then completely ignored that decision, pushing you along a story arc, the game predetermined for you. The illusion of choice is a great thing so long as you maintain the illusion. As soon as the player realizes it was an illusion, immersion is broken and the choices are realized to be meaningless. In Grand Theft Auto games, the player can go anywhere in the city and do anything they want at any time, right? Of course not. That would be impossible. In fact, the vast majority of buildings can't even be entered. However, Rockstar does a fantastic job of maintaining that illusion, the feeling of freedom, by properly implemented open world mechanics, resulting in meaningful decisions and a positive player experience. The final pitfall we'll discuss as a less than meaningful decision is called the handcuffing decision. For this, let's define a high-level player experience of The Witcher 3. I'd say it goes something like this. You ride around on your horse through a vast environment killing stuff. Sound about right? Is that fair? Okay. So here's the question. What if I let you kill your horse? Yeah, it's an option and you know where the results will lead. It would change the gameplay to slowly, agonizingly, and painfully walking around a huge environment, eventually coming upon something you might be able to kill. In other words, the results of this decision make the player experience suck. Or more professionally, we'll say, the results of the decision considerably impact the player experience in a negative way. Did the player know what they were doing? Maybe. Should they have to accept the consequences of their action? Possibly. But one thing to remember is that the player always has one particular choice that they can make whether you give it to them or not. To quit playing your game. Flame the forums, tell all their friends that game sucks, and never buy any DLC or sequels. Once more, this is not necessarily bad or wrong. It is merely likely to result in a handcuffing decision. If you still want to use this technique, this mechanic, to create a very punishing player experience, go for it. But go into it with eyes open and be ready to iterate and quickly release a patch when the player base cries foul. The best way to identify a handcuffing decision? It might seem meaningful at the time, but it will lead to problems down the road, or it will negatively impact the overall expected player experience. Game Design 2, Module 1 Lecture Recap. This is the course review at a glance. This month, we'll be looking at the discipline, techniques, and most importantly, practice of game design. Games are interactive experience governed by rules. Movies can plot audience engagement on a tension curve. However, games, being dynamic, need to target flow. The flow diagram maps the challenge presented by the game to the skills developed by the player. High challenge, low skill results in frustration. High skill and low challenge leads to boredom. A low challenge, low skill scenario produces apathy. And to reach flow, we gradually increase challenge as the player develops mastered skills. Meaningful decisions typically consist of 3 parts. The decision point, where the player knows that they are making a decision. The options, all the possible choices the player can make. And the results, where each option leads, the benefits and consequences. And the 4 poor decision structures we covered were blind decisions, not knowing the results of the options, obvious decisions, where there is only one real or viable option provided, meaningless decisions, where all the options ultimately lead to the same result, and handcuffing decisions, those that may seem meaningful, but negatively and irrevocably impact the player experience.